Welcome to part 2 of the Incident Commander training. My name is Jenny Schmitz. I'm the Director of Healthcare Preparedness for All Clear Emergency Management Group. I'm one of the instructors for today, and my counterpart, Will Moorhead.
Good morning.
Well, so we will be the instructor moderators for today. Go ahead, Will.
You did hear me, right?
Yes.
Just checking. All right. Go ahead.
You're there. Okay. So the part 2 today, we just did some introductions and instructions. To recap a little bit of what we learned in part 1, we're really going to spend most of our time talking through practical application of this. We're going to do a little bit of a scenario like we did yesterday and have you work some of those documents and ask you a lot of questions. So today's content will be based around a scenario. Practice for today, just like they were yesterday. A couple of few things for the hospital incident command system. We'll talk a little bit more about some additional roles and responsibilities for the incident commander. And then we'll discuss other positions and their expectations of a incident commander. Fighters Will Moorhead is here on the phone. Jenny Schwartzer is also available. She may add some content and some comments as well as we move through this. And then there on the bottom, I'm Jenny Schmitz, Director of Healthcare Planning. Really quickly about part 1, and I'm going to turn this actually over to Will Moorhead to walk through this review.
Okay, go ahead to the next one, Jenny. You guys all remember we talked yesterday about the
Will, Dad.
Your picture of your favorite conductor up there. There we go.
Yeah.
Want to introduce him?
Yeah, we're on the class yesterday, saw this picture a little bit already. A man there that is the conductor is my favorite. He is John Williams. He's a conductor and a composer, and he is really how I like to frame the role of the incident commander as the conductor of the orchestra, as a person who leads the orchestra to make sure all of the musicians are playing their part. He doesn't have to play every single instrument. He is the conductor and the coordinator. So I always use him as an example when I teach incident commander position.
So the other, and Jenny, just yell at me if for some reason you can't hear me. I'll turn my Bluetooth off. But the other pieces and parts that we reviewed yesterday are unity of command, and we're going to talk about unified command briefly today. So the distinction there is unity of command is that every person reports to one person. And then we talked about functional responsibilities. And so these are the primary functions that we will talk about, and you guys remember we can further divide each of these functions. So just a few key points from that. Go ahead to the next one, Jenny. And about the planning P, and yesterday we spent some time on the initial response, and remember that the link, the planning process link as an example down there in the slide, those are when you have the copies of the presentations, those are links that you can reach out, that you can use for additional information. We're going to talk today about the extended response piece of the planning P. So hit the next one. Well, yeah, we covered all these, I think. Going forward. Yeah, so about the extended response. And we talked yesterday about some of the briefing meetings. Today we get into a little more detail about the how multi-agencies get together, so unified command and multi-agency coordination as part of this extended response, and how you as the incident commander make that connection. Go ahead, Jenny. We all heard the phrase unified command. The question is, you know, how do we utilize that and what's that actually about? And the idea, you know, we always say, oh, well, that's where police, fire, and EMS work together, or where, you know, a group of agencies in one jurisdiction together. But we don't really often think about what that looks like. And so the idea is, and I think we all agree that that coordinating together is beneficial, right? So we can prioritize our and objectives together. We can make, so if there's 4 or 3 agencies, we can make one set of objectives. My agency can say, well, we're going to work on this strategy, and another agency can say, we're going to work on this strategy, and can see that those parallel or there might be some overlaps. We can collaborate on that, right? So that it's a good idea. But and there is hopefully some efficiency of resource utilization, so that if we are having to go and pick up a resource somewhere, that we don't both send a vehicle to go or a person to go pick up a resource, or we both don't commit human resources to a task. So that's a good idea, but how we actually do that is tricky, particularly in a hospital where fire and EMS in the hospital might be different places. They may not physically be in the same command center. It's real easy to visualize this if we're thinking about being on scene and we can stand side by side at a vehicle accident or at an apartment fire. But when we talk about the hospital is in their command center and the other agencies are in their command posts, what that looks like. And so we really have to begin to think about how we could collaborate virtually. And this is another task of the incident commander to work with the liaison officer. Remember in the slides where or in the previous slide where we visualized the command staff, maybe it's the liaison officer, that coordinator, and maybe it's the incident commander as him or herself, but where we actually talk with and maybe have a phone call hourly or every 2 hours, or maybe the incident commander has to try to go and meet with the other incident commanders depending on the situation. But I think that's one of those things to figure out. I worked with a hospital years ago that drills on fire evacuation, and they had the fire department actually quote unquote respond, and they would come so that the arriving engine company and battalion chief would know which door to the hospital to come to. And then they had to figure out that somebody in the fire department, the way to do it was that someone in the fire department had to come into the hospital command center. And so, again, as we're talking about best practices for incident commanders, thinking through unified command and actually what that will look like, and do you know how to actually get those people's phone numbers? Because radio frequencies are helpful, but sometimes they need. This is a collaborative discussion. Look at what we're trying to do is our objectives and strategies. And so there has to be more conversation than just a radio transmission. So this really has to be thought out. And Jenny, you can hit the next slide. We have to think about unified command and how we would do that and how we would make that. And so the question to you guys is, and we'll do the same thing we did yesterday, just make sure that you're chatting to everyone, and we'll kind of summarize these as we go. But types of things in your facility that would involve unified command, and it may not be police, fire, and EMS. There may be other agencies, but what are some of those? Give us some examples. Bomb threats, fire,
power outage and a fire this morning at a local school. That's an interesting one. That is privately, so let's know that everyone is chatting to everyone. Answers.
Nice. Good. High accident. You guys are mentioning both things that are internal and external, right? So some things might happen in your facility. Some things might happen in the community or threaten your facility. A train derailment is a community event that might create mass casualty. For shooter could be a big fire or shooting event in the community or in your facility, right? And so thinking about how that unified command would actually happen. And so I would challenge you guys who are going to be the incident commanders to think about that. How would you actually connect with those other organizations? And in the heat of the moment, right? We know those people, we see them at meetings, but again, do they arrive at the right door? Do they even know you have a command center? Do they know where it is? Do you know how to contact them through dispatch or whatever to figure out where their command post is or whose phone number, because they have a battalion chief that changes shifts. Unless you keep up with that schedule, you don't know who's on which one. Okay, Jenny, you can go to the next slide. So I think that's, we need to think about how we can accomplish that unified command. And I'm already beginning to talk about this concept of being integrated into the community response, right? And so there are lots of different things that you can do to accomplish that. And you as the incident commander may not have to be the one that's at all of these meetings, and maybe your liaison person or somebody from the organization. But as we said yesterday, you are the conductor who can reach out and draw upon the resource or the expertise as needed. And so maybe you don't fully understand how the police department responds, but somebody's been going to some meetings with them, or maybe you don't understand all of how ESF-8 in the county works, but you have somebody who's been going to you guys maybe don't use ESF, but your health and medical group in the county. So it's understanding roles and responsibilities, and the mutual understanding piece there. Like I said, we did another exercise years ago where they were actually evacuating it was an empty hospital that they staffed and evacuated. It was a drill. They did it 3 different times. And the first day, the fire chief stayed in his vehicle. The second day, different fire chief, but he figured out after talking with the guy from the first day that he could go inside the facility and that there actually was a command post. And I remember him walking in and saying, wow, I didn't realize all of this happening in here. And so educating one another is a really important piece. And whether we're talking about unified command, or go ahead to the next one, Jenny, or as we talk about multi-agency coordination and how that works, right? And so the MAC is kind of a bigger picture of unified command, and it is it's more of a think big EOC, right? The Emergency Operations Center, rather than command posts with multiple agencies. And so we're moving to a different level now, a different level of coordination. And so as we talk about MACs, right, whether it's unified command or MAC, this requires that we as an organization and as an incident commander understand how the agencies work, but also what the expectations are within the community, what the resources are available, how we access those resources. And a lot of you know that that's one of the projects we're working on with your regions, is to develop a MAC plan or to fine-tune the MAC process that's in place. Jenny, go ahead to the next one. So that's one of the things that we want to do is help you guys figure out, how you can coordinate, and I hate to use the word coordination on this slide because I'm going to use it a lot, but how you can integrate all of those resources, whether on a command function or a coordination function. And so think about it this way. Think about come to being more of the on-scene type of activity, if you will. It's directing, ordering, controlling, right? You have the authority of your facility to manage your incident. And so unified command means that you might managing your incident alongside another organization that's managing their incident, or they have a similar vested interest in managing their incident. The nation side of the MAC is that it's supporting the overall command structure. And so this is where one hospital has to evacuate, several of us support the command, several other hospitals and EMS agencies support the command at that hospital. Or fire department and EMS have a mass casualty incident, several of us are supporting the coordination at on scene. Okay, Jenny, go to the next one. So, question is, what are the benefits to the MAC system? Do you guys understand that? And just give us some feedback. And I'm going to just say MAC benefits is the question on the slide. And do you see a benefit? Or have you recognized a benefit previously? Research. Yeah, the more eyes see the whole picture. That's great. You know, somebody else that's looking, thinking, multiple resources, expertise, facility, right? Makers at the table, even if it's a virtual table, right? Let's keep that in mind. We may not all have to go and find the physical table to sit around. Okay, you can hit the next one. That's great, guys. I think you're getting the idea that, or you already have the idea that we're trying to coordinate lots of agencies. So then, what are the conflicts between MAC and ICS or IC? How will that collide? The idea of coordinating versus commanding. With a comment that everybody has their own idea of how to manage, right? Yeah, in charge of which issue, right? It's not necessarily who's in charge. Hopefully, Unified Command will determine who's in charge. It's who's in charge of which issue. Yeah, the ICs run with it. Brings up a good point that the MACs aren't necessarily making the decision. They're providing resources. And it's back to Vicky's comment there about I'm not sure their role in the event, understanding who's doing what exactly are we trying to accomplish, each one of the IC or the MAC. Go ahead, Jenny. So we'll talk about transfer of command. I just want to summarize that thought of that indicates, again, like we talked about the IC and understanding how Unified Command would be established. And I've done a whole workshop with a bunch of communities on how to establish Unified Command, and it's fascinating that even some very experienced incident managers and people who are on incident management teams haven't really figured out within their own communities just rapidly establish that Unified Command. They think about that being 2 days down the road or 40 hours down the road or something, rather than within the first couple of hours. And thinking through that and thinking through and understanding the MAC. And so you as the incident commander, but also making sure that, again, if you're the conductor, that the people under you, the command staff and the general staff also understand that. I referenced earlier that maybe you have to go meet with some of these people. Maybe you have to go and be a part of a MAC meeting or a Unified Command meeting as the incident commander. And maybe you just need to use the restroom. Maybe to go home and sleep. And so where we want to talk about the transfer of command. And we alluded to this yesterday. You know, we talked about groups would go out and meet, and that the operations group may go meet and work, and the planning group may go meet and work in between briefings. And I made a statement about, but you would still be in the room. You as the incident commander would still be either present, or people would know how to get a hold of you. So the issue is what happens if you need to step away, or how do you maintain that presence? And so that's really what transfer of command is about. You are going to pass your command for some period of time, whether it's an entire operational period or whether it's just for a short period of time while you go to a meeting or something, to another incident commander. And so what that is actually about and what that actually entails, it really just takes a little bit of practice and forethought in terms of being able to pass along the information they need quickly to get them up to speed on what's happened in the last operational period or what's been happening recently, and then what's going to happen. So kind of a review and a preview. Go ahead, Jenny. Let's talk first about, and I listed off a few of these, but when would you transfer command? Said operational period. I like David's comment, changes in incident complexity, and we'll touch on that. Available or somebody more qualified. Maybe when we move into Hicks, I think that's right. You're thinking of all these things, right? There's the you need to sleep, you need to rest, there's that sort of stuff, and then there's the I'm in over my head. And I think the one is the ability to recognize that and maybe you get in over your head just for an entire operational period or some piece of it because you're tired or because the priorities of that operational period or the next two operational periods are something that you don't have the expertise or ability to really deal with. And so thinking about that and then how that actually happens. Go ahead, Jenny. And how that would happen and to actually practice that. And maybe even, again, we talked yesterday about some tip tricks, things you might put in your little notebook of tips is how you would do that, a little checklist. And there are resources within lots of ICS resources for what that might look like. But there could be a briefing. And so within this extended period, right, we're going to circle this circle several times, and you may have to do this. So and maybe some of you guys have done this as you've gone around the top of the planning P, where have you done your transfer of command? Right, so in the command center, and then St. Cloud, you guys said at the ops briefing, and so where in the planning P, right? And virtual, some of you have done this virtually, so that's physically where, and then the other question is where on the planning P. Okay, depending on where we are.
And just ask a question, if it can be done by phone, absolutely it can be done by phone or virtually, however you need to do that. Yes, by phone is a possibility.
A great point. And I think, again, it depends on your operational periods. It depends on the complexity of things. The staff meeting would depend on how up to date everybody is. If you are super busy, and I can think of examples where the more qualified incident commander has arrived and said, the current incident commander, when you're ready, transfer, right? And so instead of just trying to do it the minute that person arrives, and that may happen when the operational period shifts, it may happen in right before or right after one of the other briefings, probably before. If you're going to do a command and general staff meeting, you would probably, the two incident commanders would talk and then plan transfer, conduct the meeting, and then plan to transfer after that so that everybody knows we're going to continue this operational period under the new incident commander. Another piece to that is to make sure that the people who are reporting to the incident commander know that the conductor has changed, that we now have a new point of contact. Because remember I said you want to be visible, you want to be able to be found, either by phone or whatever, and so people need to know who it is they're physically looking for or who they're trying to communicate with. Go ahead, Jenny.
So, question, we kind of talked through some of these as possibilities. Reason why you're transferring command, if it's the end of your shift and it's time for the new crew to come in, if, like we talked about, somebody's in over their head, if a more experienced person has come in. So really, as we said, it can be kind of held everywhere or within this process.
Yeah. So quick, you guys just tell us, what do you include in the briefing? And I'm trying to type transfer briefing. We have all of the conversation just so we have some things to refer back to summarize all these discussions. But I'm trying to put the questions in. But what information do you include? Some of you will see this information and say, oh, I need to add that to my little IC cheat sheet list. Not briefing. Not training. Nice. And the general staff, right? Yeah. Who is your team? Who's your orchestra at the moment? Objectives, and then I like the potential changes. A situation report. I like information on where to find them. Okay. So, I again, having made a quick reference, if you don't do this very often, so you don't forget something, and understanding what your current status is, right? We talk about current status, but what does that involve? How of the information you're going to give, that kind of depends on where you are in the planning piece. Also remember, and as we talk through the other positions in subsequent trainings, remember that each of these positions has the planning chief and the operations chief. They'll be filling out ICS forms. And there will be information. Remember yesterday we looked at command centers and we talked about handwritten information. So sometimes when you are referring to things, you might just say, depending again where you are in the planning piece, hey, I know that the planning section has just completed these forms, or I know that ops is working on these forms, so you'll be able to get more from them, or hey, reference these couple of flip charts that are on the walls. And give. So when we say current status, think about what's involved in that, so that you can give accurate information. Okay, go ahead.
This is a little checklist as a resource. We had a lot of these already when we were talking. Just some of the things that could be involved with the transfer of command briefing. We got a situation that is an objectives and organization. If there's some sort of budgetary things you mention to people, that's always good to know. Resources have been ordered. Any sort of facilities that are impacted, or the scope of what the impacted area is. Community plan and media briefings, any of those things are really important for that new person coming in. This is a quick checklist of some of those things could be involved in that briefing.
The idea, you guys have probably gathered in the last few hours of yesterday and today that I like the idea of checklist. I think it's very easy to say, oh, I'll cover everything, but some of the small things you may forget. A resource assignment. If you're covering all these other things and you're talking about the news media's here and you're sharing various information, you may just forget that they've assigned some resources or that you've requested resources. And so it's in the heat of it, it's just nice to have some of that. And then remember, you don't have to give them all the detail. You just say, we've got some things ordered, check with, and send them to the person in your group. The new incident commander will continue to gather information as their operational period continues. Go ahead, Jenny.
Try. And like I said, most of the session today is very much based on a bigger scenario like we did yesterday, a little more complex scenario. So we're going to run through a situation for all of you, and we'll still use the chat feature to record some of your answers for discussion so everyone else can see what your answers are. So it's a little bit bigger than we did in part one. Establish your HICS team based on what the scenario is. You have the incident action plan, quick start guide, and the incident response guide to help guide you through this process. We're going to talk more about an initial incident briefing, and we're going to talk about a transfer of command and see what that actually looks like. So like in part one, it is another beautiful spring day in Minnesota. The weathercast talks about some severe storms possible across the state. Region is not included in that forecast. So do you have primary concerns if this is the weather outlook for you?
Yeah,
No.
Yeah.
Fine. Absolutely. Eye on weather and maintaining awareness, absolutely. The news that a series of severe storms and possibly tornadoes have hit various areas across the state. And reports say that the metro area, Rochester, and northern Minnesota have had severe weather. There are also several hospitals impacted, and the damage seems severe. If this information, you see it on the news, what initial response actions within your organization?
No staff, getting people safe. Some of these hospitals, right? So that's that concept of every time you receive a piece of information, you have to ask yourself, who needs to know this? And so there's something going on with you, or potentially maybe you want to share that with them, or maybe you want to find out what's going on with them because you see something that. So it'd be a resource for that. That's good. Nice. Okay.
So more coming in from local national media of several hospitals with a direct hit and significant facility damage. Potential for evacuation of thousands of patients from the area, northern Minnesota, and then potentially Rochester as well. The lucky one that assumes the role of the incident commander. 3 things that you do after receiving your lucky appointment as the incident commander. Thank you. Yes, assign a scribe.
ICS or EOC, get that open, begin information, information gathering process, right? Each of your departments are supposed to report in, or one key group of people arrives so that you can assign positions and gather information. Good.
Notifications do you need to make to activate a response at your facilities?
Statements and at all.
Your leaders, community partners. So the notice process is very much to your staff, right? And to start letting them know that something's coming. So up the flagpole a little bit. Your CEO, your senior leaders. I worked in a hospital that their board of directors wanted to know anytime something at their facilities. So it was the incident commander's role to communicate up to the board of directors as well. External agencies, your city or county, absolutely public health, some of your utility companies, depending on how it is. Those are all good to wrap in early in the response. I mentioned start activating positions, activating ICS. Which roles do you activate first? A little bit what we talked about in part 1 as well. There's no right or wrong answer to these. It depends on situation, it depends on your facility, it depends on qualifications of the people that you put in these roles. So I like what your responses are. I see CIO right away. That makes sense. And always the scribe. Like I said, whenever I was an incident commander, the first position I wanted was somebody helping me take notes. Command and general staff positions in there, as well as the scribe, runners, also important, I think, potentially. Absolutely. So think about who you put in each role. We talked yesterday that sometimes a position title makes sense in their leadership role, but times it's Bob, and Bob's just really good at coordinating things and maintains a level head. So in your perspective, who do you put in each role? With statement that it depends on the time of day, absolutely it does. But if we're heading for this scenario that it is right now, a normal business day in the middle of the day, in the morning, who are fill into these boxes? And we're more time to discuss some of these as you are working in groups. So keep talking, thinking. We'll give you a little time.
So Lakewood's example, it's something to talk about in your groups. They said most appropriate person for subject matter. How, if that's the, and a lot of people say that, so how do you guys go about determining who that is? Is there a group of people that vote? Is it quick consensus? And it may be any of those. There's not a wrong, again, like Jenny said, there's not a wrong answer. It just is important to think about how would you actually say who is the most appropriate person right now, quickly, or in a period of time.
Definitely getting the idea. Area of decision, yes, that very well could be. Your leadership may have some bias either way. I know in my experience there is some interesting political things that happen when a senior is play an incident command system, but it's actually a manager underneath them that is more qualified. I've been in several situations where that manager has come in and our place is their boss. I mean, interesting things that happen. That circumstance happens within the hospital command center. Now let's keep moving on with our scenario here. A person that you assigned as the operations chief has emergency and cannot fill that role. The primary person is unavailable for that role, be it a vacation or whatever happens to be. This is their backup.
Yeah, so some guys, like St. Cloud said, another administrative nursing supervisor, and I think that's kind of what Mike I'm saying is if selected by position, then pick the next person for it that would take that position. And so, and then some of you have some other ideas of the qualified or some nursing or the emergency manager.
Some issues with this where our backup, our number 2 person on operations, was the one person under logistics. So we have had some experience where that we had to scramble a little bit to make sure those boxes were filled, and we didn't have enough depth in our organization and our training to fill all those boxes. So this became a real issue for us.
The other thing, I've heard that several times, and we also, yeah, and that's a good point. The IC could be, remember, if the fundamental tenet with the incident commander is if he or she doesn't assign it, then he or she is responsible for it. So the IC could be the ops chief, and that's what I was going to say just a second ago is that, remember, part of the incident commander is being able to understand the organization, and I have been incident commander of events and organizations where I don't fully understand, but that means I have to just have more collaboration with the people who are there. So if we say we knew ops chief, who could do that? And then we quick conversation about who's available and what do we need them to do. And some of you might have this well scripted out in your plans, but it is important to think about just who would you quickly collaborate with, because the IC may not be the most experienced person, unfortunately, at that moment. That's what these trainings are helping to do, to equip more people. But it might be the midnight on a weekend, and the IC is really working as best they can, but they need an ops chief, and they've got to figure that out. So figuring out how you can collaborate, who you can collaborate, or who you reach back to, and then maybe having just a list of qualified people who can. Some of you probably do that according to your answers. I'm betting that some of you have, like Jenny said, their number 2 ops person was their number 1 logistics person. So they had a list at least of who could play the role.
Major phone calls. Everybody has assembled in your hospital command center. Police has gathered initially to start talking about this incident. So what's the first thing that happens once you all get in the same room together? Exactly on the head, right? Just like we talked about yesterday, that initial briefing, we're going to start talking about what's going on, filling roles, start work objectives, working through the IAP. Absolutely.
So again, remember, think about this is actually going to happen. Somebody said introductions. That's a good and important thing to remember. Remember how this is going to happen. People are going to trickle in, and if something big has happened or something sensational, it's a little different if it's like a pandemic that's evolving over several days. But a no notice or short notice event, people are walking in saying, "Did you see this? Did you hear this?" There'll be a lot of sidebar conversation. So you, as the incident commander, have to very quickly get a scribe, get somebody to start just capturing notes, and then at some time, 5 minutes after the hour or whatever, say, "All right, the briefing's going to start." Everybody may not be there, but what I said makes sense. Once you start that briefing, you figure out what do we know, then go back around the room and say what are our priorities. the information you'll need to start your IAP, to start your 201, all of those things, right, to establish your objectives. So I try to be very practical about this, and having seen this happen, people will log in and 2 or 3 people, and they'll start a briefing, and then 5 more people arrive and they got to start over. So just capture the information as they're coming in, and don't let a bunch of sidebar conversations and phone calls start, because then you got to get them back. Just what you know as they're walking in, put it on a piece of paper, and then say, all right, 5 minutes after the hour, we're going to start the briefing, and go from there. Go ahead, Jenny.
And then things we actually learned, we started putting big pieces of paper on the wall. So as we're taking notes and people were trickling in, they start reading what we had previously talked about. So it helps us count on some of those multiple startings of briefings and reading ourselves, because those are definitely inefficient. So one of the suggestions I gave yesterday is to put some things on the wall. One I laminated and expanded was the incident action plan. So where we're going to start, you guys all definitely said that we need to get on the same page to start with. So we start walking through the IAP. This is what we have so far, right? So our incident name is going to be Tornado 2016. And now our facility is not impacted, so there's no specific health and safety message related to this incident. As commander, now let's define our operational period. How long do you think this first operational period is going to go? It's 1 hour. It's probably good. We know from this scenario so far, we just have had reports, massive damage, and tornadoes potentially across the state. This will develop pretty quickly, so hours seems pretty darn reasonable. Maybe hours. I see some other folks saying hours. Okay, so your initial fixed charge, and I can make this up, there's no right or wrong answers to this, but so far you've assigned an incident commander, we have a public information officer, a liaison officer, 2 people under operations, a plan chief, and then a logistics chief. It's a little bit already, but what other roles would you see necessary in this?
No, Jay, David said scribe and runner. That's obviously something we harped on yesterday. I appreciate that. Here's a good one.
Other roles. It's a good one. Vice, absolutely.
Today, but we don't have to be curious about doing operations planning, logistics, finance. We might just need, we don't need, I mean, there's nothing wrong with those answers here. We don't necessarily need the general staff. We might need security, right? Maybe we need to activate that somewhere within an ICS structure, and maybe for a short period of time, there are a general staff position just because of the way that the event is unfolding.
We talked about this a little bit already, but now set the tone for the initial briefing. What instruction do you give your team as everybody has assembled? And talk about kind of painting a picture of what this looks like, right? People coming in and out, cell phoning, people talking to each other. Did you see this? Well, just said this. All things are going to happen. And so the initial briefing is a tricky thing to get everyone's attention. Cell phones, that makes a ton of sense. One talking at a time.
So Wood and St. Cloud answers, I think, are related, getting that update and maybe some specific info on census, discharge status, staffing status. I mentioned yesterday, you might have a process that if a what a code is called or your command is activated, that every department submits a specific set of information, and that's something you could just drill on and drill that so that when you activate, you know that's coming. Yesterday, remember that you have to be a parent and kind of drive the HCC forward, and you guys seem to have captured that. Keep people, it's again, turn off the cell phones, like Jenny also honed in on that one. It's tough. That's really hard when you're also trying to collect information. So, and what I'm about to say I know is really tough in a small organization, but sometimes if you have enough people around, you get a core group of people to part of the briefing, and let's say that Jen and I are responding, and I'm a nurse manager and she's a facilities director. Maybe and I just leave our cell phone outside of the room with somebody and just say, answer this and take messages. That way I don't have to spend the time to do voicemail and all that, and then just have somebody who could do that. I know that's hard if only 10 of you in the hospital at night, but the cell phone piece is really frustrating when you're trying to do a briefing, but also then people are looking at it, they're distracted, but then at the same time, that's how they're getting information. So try to figure out the balance of that. And again, that's that practical stuff that I like to think through.
Initial situation summary. This is what we know so far. Based on the reports, total impacted areas include the Metro, Chester, and Bemidji. Significant damage is reported. Local and state emergency operations centers are activating. At this time, there's no specific request for our support, but we are expecting to take evacuated patients as they move from those damaged areas. Room and do a very quick briefing. Like yesterday, kind of a round-robin approach is the one that I like to use the best. With each individual section chief and asking, what do you know and what are your concerns? So as we go around the room, operations says we are full and fully staffed at this time. Shift is over and the night staff have gone home. The facility is functioning just as normal. Concerns, if we get patients, we need to make space and have additional staff and equipment. I learned about the continuity of normal appointments and services during this response. Plans. The intervention plan has started. At this time, again, no official request for assistance. Everyone should complete your documents, especially the HICS 214, which is the activity log. Pending at this point, additional staff for additional patients. This is a big response and could last for several days, if weeks. We will run resources quickly, and we need to stay ahead of this one. says, we have some equipment to handle a small surge of patients, but have enough equipment or food for a large number of patients for a prolonged stay. Look at the weather to see if there may be any additional storms coming that might impact you, or a second round that would impact the already impacted areas. Officer says the local and state EOCs are activating in the affected areas. No rest of us just yet. Evacuation, organization, and transport will come in a few hours. It's still total chaos in those active areas. And then the liaison officer concerns the capacity within your region and within the state to house all of those evacuated patients, and the nation and tracking of all of them as they disperse from where they started. Your reports, no media requests yet, but most are covering the damaged areas. I assume we'll get queries eventually. Other folks, we need to talk to our staff and our patients about the response and ensure their care continues. Concern about media inquiries and quick notification to staff and patients. In this scenario, in part one, we had talked about other functions that we need to do to produce a concert. So with concerns already, what other functions need to happen to prepare for incoming patients? Answers here. So between labor pools and medications management, review, information from Mintrack, that's also good. Setting up a space for incoming patients. You got to have alternate care facilities or areas within your hospital that you could set up to accommodate more patients?
That Vicki said, consider closing the clinic to use this for inpatients.
You were perfect. And the question is, what resources will be needed? We talked some stuff already: food, basic equipment, some supplies, some staff. But what other stuff will you need to support incoming patients? Yeah, those answers: food, meds, staff, physicians, cots, blankets, laundry. Yes, laundry is always a big one. So the next part of this process is to summarize some of those concerns. So as you've seen your own answers and everybody else that is using the chat feature, summarize some of those concerns. So what are some of the big categories and the prioritizations we can say at this point as far as what we need to do? That's perfect, St. Cloud Hospital. So we've kind of heard everybody's concerns, done some summarization of those, is to fall back to our command and general staff meeting and really start talking about objectives. How do we manage this and what are the objectives that we are going to set in an initial response? So what are initial objectives? So as we talk through objectives, I see some good ones in here, and I see some that are maybe a little too detailed for bigger response objectives. So the objectives that are outlined in the incident response guide that are really good for these is provide safe and appropriate patient care. As a big umbrella, that very much fits with the life safety part, the patient care part. I think staffing part would fit in there as well because you need appropriate staff to provide appropriate patient care. So adding labor pool and talking about staffing and also additional resources, medical equipment, medication, all of those things all fall under that one big umbrella of safe and appropriate patient care. That I think very much pertain to us so far, provide continuity of care for non-incident patients, right? Still that thing, we have a house full of patients already. We need to ensure their continuity of care, so we make sure that all of our current patients have exactly what they need in the phases of this response. And then maintain communications with healthcare and other response partners. You guys talking about EMS agencies and some other resources outside of your walls to coordinate with. And those are the three really good objectives to start with. We take those objectives and we assign them to somebody, okay? So the first one, safe and appropriate patient care, what book would you assign that one to? And that makes a lot of sense. Perfect. Next one, provide continuity of care for non-incident patients. Again, plans, logs, operations. Maintain communications with healthcare and other response partners. That one too. PIO, yes, this could be one of those weird things where it fits in the middle between PIO and liaison. In our liaison officer course, we had talked about how those two functions could be performed by one person. It's under there. As we move forward, now it's the tactics meeting. We have our objectives, and now essentially what happens is that the operations chief for the part breaks into sections, and they start talking about specific things that they do to meet those objectives. Leaves, when do you want to have your next briefing? Commander, this is one of your tasks, is to everybody back together at some point. So when would you schedule your next briefing? Looks like it's saying 1 hour. I think 1 hour makes a lot of sense. That'll break into their groups, talk about their specific concerns, and then report back. .1 hour between the first briefing and the next briefing. What did the incident commander do? Good answer, Mike. Perfect. And then take a nap? Okay. I know Commander that wrote on their cheat sheet specifically to order pizza, sure to take care of all the staff that was helping out. But that's getting for the long haul, monitoring the process, talking specifically one-on-one with command staff, and thinking, yes, all of those things are good.
This is a good point to pause and think back about what we've talked about the last several questions. And if you back up, we were talking, the briefing, you guys gave lots of information about stuff that people would be doing during the first few periods, or things that would need to happen. So, we talked about labor pools and discharging patients and food and family assistance and all of those sorts of things. This is a good time. Yesterday we talked about kind of root cause analysis. This is a good time to meet in with those people and say, now, how, and just kind of hear their tactics, or if they're having their various meetings, to get an ear on that. So you have, even if you don't know every tactic, it is just helpful to know how they're going to accomplish it. You have an opportunity now to kind of listen to those various conversations and make sure that operations and analytics aren't going in two different directions or whatever. So it is a good opportunity to ask some of those root cause questions and to get a little more detail. You wanted to stay out of that detail during the briefing, but now you can get a little more. And again, not your job to drive that detail, but just helpful to kind of know what's going on and to be involved in it a little bit.
As well of your specific experts, this is the time where you can ask some questions.
Yes.
And one of you mentioned, I know the PIO for messaging. Your PIO comes to you and hands you a message for the staff. The message says, based on the storms in our state today, we are beginning to plan to take evacuated patients into our facility. At this time, we do not have any patients en route, but we will be ready to assist our community partners. The Health Command Center has been activated. Please stay tuned to your email for more information and instructions. Incident Commander, what is with this message? Points, yes, the specific phone number for the command center or to contact staff in command center. And shifts until told otherwise. Yes, plans, where questions should be referred to, that's a great one. Don't forget about those who may not be sitting in front of their email. Yet always a concern in a healthcare institution where nurses are up and running around and not sitting in front of a computer. The next IO sends you is specifically a message to post on your website. This is geared towards our current patients, families, those people that may have appointments scheduled the next day, or patients currently in your facility. This is a message the PIO has proposed. Based on the storms in our state today, we are preparing to take additional patients from evacuated facilities. We are committed to your continued care, even in this time of tragedy. As now, all scheduled appointments and services are open as usual. Please need to monitor our website for the most current information about our services and our response to this community tragedy. What is this message? The idea of other information, send the local radio, TV, and other methods that your patients and their families may get information. Yeah, Facebook, Twitter, any of the other venues and methods, absolutely. Now the meetings have happened. All the chiefs have broken and gone back to their specific areas now for the planning meeting, and everybody to report back on what they have found and what they have done. Planning meeting is conducted by the planning chief, and that is based specifically on the objectives as we discussed before. So, operations, we assign 2 specific objectives: appropriate patient care and the continuity of care for non-incident patients. That operations has said to ensure the appropriate staffing numbers, so we will call in staff as needed and work with planning on that. There are appropriate medical equipment and supplies, specifically with logistics on that, and ensure the facility integrity for patient care. So within operations, they want to make sure the building is still appropriate to provide patient care. PIO was assigned to the 3rd objective. So specifically what they're going to do is connect with other healthcare facilities in the region through the HMAC, the Healthcare Multi-Agency Coordination System. We talked about MinTrack and some other things, so they're going to keep their eye on what's happening outside of your walls. What information does the incident commander give to the team at this point? I've got that, absolutely. Summary of what we know. The incident commander may not have anything to add at this point, which is 100% fine. As coordinators, this is really where they sit and listen to what everybody else is doing to ensure that the objectives are being worked on. Next exciting phone call comes. Evacuation of patients has begun from the metro area. Your facility is going to receive patients in about 60 minutes. So based on a change in scenario or a new piece of information, this is where you start with the reevaluating your incident action plan. We start over again, right? We start with our tornado name. We defined our operational period. Base situation summary, as we know at this point, impacts the metro area, Rochester, and Bemidji. Significant and patient evacuation has begun. We don't know many, but we will receive patients in 60 minutes. Health message at this point, still standard precautions and general basic protection for your staff. Positions would you activate? Now that you know patients are coming, they're in about 60 minutes, what positions would you activate? I see people saying medical technical specialist. What would you put in that box? What is the purpose? What specific role would you want the medical technical specialist? In some triage. I think that makes a lot of sense. That's good. Wrong answers, whichever boxes you want to fill, is absolutely up to you. And as we repeat our briefing status, we'll start with operations. Operations, what do you know? Opera reports that all beds are full, and they identified early discharges that we can process. Some procedures that we can cancel tomorrow. We will need staff and supplies to set up your surge space. Staff is notified, and we have some staff volunteers who need to come to work. We don't know how many patients or the criticality of patients that we will be getting. Do we have a record? Is staff overtime authorized? We're not that we'll have enough supplies, and could impact our normal operations for a long time. Plan. The initial incident action plan is complete, and we are starting a second one. Everybody sure you use your 214 form to document your actions. Think about tracking incoming patients and calling additional staff, and then what additional severe weather with these storms. We have taken inventory of all supplies and equipment that we have. We've contacted our suppliers and vendors to let them know we may need additional supplies. Every other hospital has contacted them too about the need for potentially needing more supplies. Concerns include that we don't know what kind of patients we're getting, so we don't know their medical needs. We may quickly run out of critical supplies. And we need outside volunteers to help staff. There's still no media inquiries, but another email should be sent to staff as soon as we have a plan. They need to know about their response, and if we need to cancel procedures, we need to put something on the website for our patients. It says that the local and state EOCs are open and coordinating the transportation. They have been activated, and they may be able to help with supplies and resources. Control patient tracking and communications with the family of those patients. And then finance, we have some ability for emergency purchases and for staff overtime, but extended response for staff overtime, large emergency equipment supply purchases may be difficult. How do we go for the incoming patient? Rev could be impacted if we have to cancel our procedures. Concerns from your primary staff, what other functions still need to prepare for incoming patients? You're saying that you need to know the number and the criticality that you are expecting. What if you know those numbers? How to prepare if you don't know numbers and criticality? I think they're prepare for the worst criticality, prepare every patient to need ventilators, and worst, kind of most critical patients you can think of. Manage, I think that's good. Calling in more physicians, hands on deck. good one. So what other resources do you need? What other stuff are you going to need now that patients are coming for sure? Lots of stuff. How determine how many staff members to call in? Do you call in?
So these are the things that we talked about yesterday too when we talked about as the IC, the authority to presumably do, but you know, it's clear that you have the authority to start cutting this many resources from the organization. As you have the authority to make decisions about which stuff, or you know, you're going to rob Peter to pay Paul kind of thing. So can you take stuff from this area and put it over here? And so there's some authority policy group connection that may need to happen. And again, tying in, thinking back to some of the practical stuff we talked about yesterday.
Summarize the concerns raised in the briefing. Assess our objectives. What are some of the new concerns that have come up? This information. All really good summaries. Those concerns, all of that new information, we translate and look at our objectives again. Objectives that we currently have: provide appropriate care for all patients, continuity of care for non-incident patients, communicate with healthcare and other responders. What objectives would you add to this list? And objectives are really overarching, big umbrella statements. All the details and the tactics come beneath those. So which of these would you add? Sustainment, St. Cloud Hospital, that's good. I think part of that, before about providing staff support, all into, right? How are we going to keep this going for a long time? Support and communication. question from Tracy about the critical access hospital bed limit be lifted for this, and I actually don't know the answer to that. Will, I don't know if you do. I have that one. I can get back to you, Tracy, on that one.
I don't.
So to pull back to the objectives in that incident response guide, I think these are pretty good ones. But let's talk about the three here. Would we remove any of these, or are these still good objectives? Okay, about some additional objectives. I think the first three are still intact. Those seem very reasonable because we do have to care for, right? But I think the two that down there in the red, I triage and treat incoming patients, and as an umbrella, that very well could include the surge places. It could include the additional staffing that would need to treat those incoming patients. So that you have mentioned already. And then the tracking. Always an issue to find out who went where and to make sure we reunify them with their families. So I think those are two really good ones. Now that we know that patients are coming. To assign those new objectives to a specific branch. So the first one, by triage and treat incoming patients, who assign that to? Technical specialist, some of you mentioned that as triage. Absolutely. Number two for planning. Number two, maintain patient tracking. Play the logical one for that. Our objective set, we've got a couple new ones now that we know that patients are specifically coming. When is your briefing? And time of arrival for patients is 60 minutes. Use your next briefing. That's the wrong answer, so I see a lot of different 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 2 hours. Just because a patient's coming in 60 minutes does not mean they will be at the door in 60 minutes. So this is up to you to decide how you would want to manage this. Back, they begin to work on their tactics specifically for each of those current objectives and the new objectives we have added. If you've had 2 resource requests come to you, as incident commander, one of the things you do is to help prioritize and to authorize resource requests. Others has requested handheld radios to communicate directly with the staff in the surge area, and logistics does not have any radios. Also like additional cots for the patient surge area. Logistics does not have any, does have enough cots and would like to purchase cots. You can only purchase one. Do you approve? So a lot. Looking for other places to get these, you may not have to buy them. So go to the county or the HMAC or some other issue. That's always good. I see a lot of people go more for cots. We can use in place of the radios. That makes sense as well. One of the key things when you get conflicting resources requests is to look at objectives. And if something ties directly to your objectives, always a good thing. So in this case, I would say that the COTS relate specifically to our objective to treat our incoming patients. The radios would be nice, but it seems like the COTS are more tied directly to the objectives. But it's no right or wrong answer for this. One of the things that the incident commander will have to do is prioritize, approve expenditure requests. Operations have requested additional staff to assist with medical care for incoming patients. Additional staff. I've seen some other folks for some help, either Minnesota Response, to the MAC, and e-request. A labor pool process. Branches need to be part of this request. Yeah, I think this is a big one, right? All of a sudden authorize a bunch of staff overtime, or you bring in somebody from the community specifically to permit in your facility. You may not pay them. There are ability issues that go with that. Good, the liaison can reach out to some of those other agencies that we mentioned above to try to recruit people. Labor pool. So everybody is still working in their specific positions. The bill comes to you again with another message. This is to approve for all staff. In tornadoes, our organization is expecting to receive evacuated patients. We are on a plan to accommodate all of them. Stay for your email for additional information. this message. Yeah, I think some more specific phone numbers. We talked about that in the last round as well. All of them, per facilities are not going to take all of the patients that are being evacuated. That's a good one. Conducted procedures or any other changes that you guys decide to make, absolutely put that in here. That's a good one. For as well, not just by email. Some other response matter, some other distribution method to make sure everybody knows this. The plan reminded you that the end of the operational period is coming. There needs to shift change within for the HICS team. Yourself and the HICS team for the new. Mission document. Start preparing the you will hand over to your new incident commander. And do the message that they would like to use for a media release. The organization is responding to the tornado incident. We are to receive patients from Rochester and Bemidji. We are trained to respond and will work diligently to continue to care for our current patients. We may call on the community for additional medical volunteers to assist with patient care. In this message, answers, contact information, emergency services as well. I've had with random people just showing up to help, not what you want. And current statuses, appointments, procedures, any of those final things as well. The transfer of command briefing. We talked about this before. Talk just a little bit more about what information you would give to the new incident commander. How would you summarize everything that's happened so far? A little cheat sheet checklist there as well. And I think we've got this one for sure. Current staffing, who the team is at this point, a sustainability plan, objectives of our response. So your facility has received all of the patients and is starting to demobilize. Look at which positions we can demobilize first. Right or wrong answer to this. I see not ready to demobilize yet. That very well could be. In an event like this, you could have a surge of patients going on for quite a long time. So this could be operational. You could have your incident command system operating for a very long time. Technical specialists. And then to wrap up our response, and we kind of fast forwarded quite a bit here towards the end. I know we only have a few minutes left in our time together. After response, or after the shift change, one of the big things, the final steps to do is collect your notes and forms from the response, right? A scenario like this is probably going to have a series of debriefs or critique sessions. Make sure the incident commander would attend all of those as needed, and then participate in the after-action report and the improvement plan to give your impact on how a response of this type would be for next time.
This slide really reiterates how much time you're going to have to invest afterwards. So just thinking that during the response, this is going to wreck the next few weeks of my work.
Yeah, absolutely. So the end of our scenario for today. So I do just want to gather a little bit of quick feedback from you guys as well. This was the part 2, based on what we did yesterday and today. What did you like about this workshop series? What did you learn? What are good things that came out of this? Active part, I see the checklist. Good. Looks like we had quite a few requests for the entire PowerPoint presentation. I'll send part 1 and part 2 to Sean, and she can send them all to you guys. You can have them for your records as well. Good. In discussions, fantastic. I know it's a little strange doing this way, and it looks like the chat function for y'all, which is good. We obviously have a series of these to do kind of through this into June. What are things that we can do better as we develop the upcoming seminars? more upcoming classes, absolutely. I think Sean can help us with that. Movements, I'm totally happy with that. Refresher. And then before I turn you guys loose, what are some lessons learned that you guys had today? What are some of those aha moments? Training, preparedness, we talked about that yesterday. Change of command, absolutely. And in general, there are a lot of documents and a lot of resources out there for all of you. So things to take advantage of. You don't have to do this by yourself. And then just one final thing as well. You guys all for your participation today. If you will submit your sign-in sheets to Sean and take a few minutes and complete those feedback forms. Really do take those to heart. We do want some suggestions how we can make this better. And then send out additional specific dates for the rest of the command and general staff positions. The last guys we're going to do is about exercises and exercise design. That's also a part of this whole series. Thank you for
I was going to say, Jenny, Mike Eitner, I saw your comment, and if you would follow up with a little more detail about what you need to get the right staff there, that would be helpful. We can accommodate that, I think. So anything like that, shoot us or Sean an email.
Thank you for participation today and yesterday. I know 4 hours is a lot to dedicate to this, so thank you so much for that. Any comments you have, please send our way. And I hope you all have a fantastic weekend.